Hey, everyone.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey, you're right on stage. Welcome to the next session. We're at content-led growth. I've got three amazing content marketers and leaders here. Super topical and relevant to the SaaS conversation that we just had, and is a nice primer too to the SEO one that's coming up next. So this one's going to be a lot more around the operational side of content, what it takes to build a team, what it takes to deliver top-notch content and kind of do that at scale. Before I introduce our guests, I don't see anything in the chat. Are people still awake? We're at the midway point, so I want to make sure that everyone's still there. All right, good. As long as people are eating in the crowd, that you know that everything's healthy.
It's just me. I'll be our own peanut gallery for this session.
Sweet. All right. Without further ado, we've got Haley Bryant is the Chief Operating Officer at the content marketing agency Animalz, which is the go-to content marketing agency for SaaS startups like Intercom, Zendesk, and Airtable. She's also a venture partner at Hustle Fund that's democratizing wealth by funding underrepresented founders. Syndey Carlton is also joining us, who is the Senior Director of Brand and Creative at Storyblocks, which is a stock photography, video, and sound platform for creators. Her ReStock campaign evangelized diverse footage to increase the inclusivity of creative projects. We're definitely going to chat about that because that sounds super interesting. And then lastly, we've got Robyn Showers, who is the Director of SEO at the video platform Vimeo, which is used by professional content teams. And Vimeo recently went public and is now listed on the Nasdaq, which is super exciting. Did you get to go and ring the button or push the button and ring the bell?
I didn't go up to New York, but we did like a little, we all kind of got on the Nasdaq ticker, and it was very exciting. Yeah, I got to send in photos and like watched live. It's very exciting.
That is exciting. I'm going to start with you, Haley. So you've gotten to learn a lot about the operational side of content, like as I mentioned, kind of building teams, but executing on behalf of your clients. Kind of as the COO of Animalz, you've got companies coming to you, and they have a specific outcome that they're looking for, and you kind of have to figure out what they're looking for. I'm curious to hear what some of the most common problems are that you hear, particularly like from any of your clients that are coming in, and then maybe give us a little flavor of like what kind of companies you work best with and what they're looking for.
Yeah, and maybe I'll flip-flop the question. So as a content marketing agency, we primarily support early stage B2B SaaS companies. We do work with later stage companies because we're able to grow with them throughout their journey. But a lot of our earliest stage companies come to us without a sense of where to get started with content. So we have a lot of founders reaching out. I heard about you through YC or from Demand Curve or someone on Twitter, and help because we don't know what to do. So a lot of the problems they come to us with are just like taking something very amorphous and helping them figure out what they should focus on. So here's what we want to do. What goals do we need to put in place? What strategy do we need to put in place to be successful in achieving those goals? So that's on the early stage side. Other problems that we see pretty frequently, just conversions, right? Maybe people have invested really heavily in top of the funnel content early, building brand awareness. They've heard a lot about the need to build an audience, which is probably over-reported in some ways because of dynamic segments and how audiences shift with SEO-based content in particular. So we're trying to help them through content audits in particular, analyze their funnel and identify gaps in their funnel to close those gaps. And then sometimes it's just helping teams scale. And that's kind of working across a lot of different teams. So being the person that goes between several different teams, product marketing, and maybe the CEO wants to do thought leadership, and we're trying to do SEO. So kind of integrating a bunch of different types of content into a single cohesive strategy that all kind of works together so that all pieces of content are kind of greater than their individual selves and form a natural whole. So that's kind of where we specialize, and specifically in long form content.
Where are those gaps that you typically find? Like, what are the most common gaps? I guess it's hard to generalize across every different like vertical, but if there's one that kind of come to mind.
Yeah, that's a really good question. the gap that I see, and maybe this is too general for you, so happy to dig into this more, but oftentimes companies that come to us, maybe they're seed or series A stage, they have done content, they have a blog, but they haven't connected all of that content together in a way that makes sense. So they have a little bit of like product marketing over here, and they have a little bit of thought leadership over here, but it doesn't make sense, which is actually awesome for us because we're able to connect them together using their existing content, right? Through like a hub and spoke model, maybe. But really, it really varies. I think the big gap that we see is really a lack of strategy. Like once there's a strategy in place, everything gets a lot easier to execute. But I talked to a CEO 2 weeks ago who said, my sales team just needs content. Like, please just get on the phone with the sales team and help us create content, which isn't necessarily super strategic, right? We're not creating a 3-month content calendar and saying, here's how we're going to grow organic over the next 6 to 12 months. It's more so, here's the bottom of the funnel thought leadership that our customers need now, and that our salespeople need now to convert those customers so we can create a win-win for both reader and business.
Yeah, we'll definitely come back to that relationship between like sales and marketing, especially on the content side, like that kind of sales enablement stuff.
Yeah, excited to dig in.
Yeah, for sure. Robyn, don't be afraid to show the dog that's hanging out. There was a cat yesterday that was a crowd favorite.
This is my cat. Yes. Did you see my face as I was like, just sit on my lap. Don't. So that's why I muted myself. He announced himself as he came in. You'll probably see him later. Okay, good. People, you have to stick around and see it later. Syndey, you're nodding your head. Like, I think a lot of this kind of relates to the kind of work that Storyblocks does, but instead of for written content, it's more like creating the visuals and the audio that brands can then slot in as their stock imagery. Maybe I'm oversimplifying kind of what Storyblocks does. Can you kind of lend an angle on how, like, and I think we'll eventually have to have the conversation of what is content. We can talk about the bigger picture of like content means different things to every company. But I'd love to hear the more like audio visual side of that you see from the content production.
Yeah. So Storyblocks believes that video is the content of the future. More and more people are watching video every day. Of course, Robyn would agree with that. And so, so when we think about content at Storyblocks, we're thinking about it in twofold. One, I'm creating content, telling them about the future of content being video. And then we're also giving them assets to then go out and create that video content with. And we just believe that stock media is a way to do it affordably and to level up your video content easily. And
then so when a group wants to work with Storyblocks, is there any sort of onboarding that you go through, or do they have access to the whole library?
They have access to the entire library in an unlimited way, because we also believe in experimentation and segmentation of your content. And so you should be able to swap out those assets easily and without like exploding the budget. So that's the fundamentals behind our model there.
Oh, that's super cool. Yeah, I love that. I haven't gotten to experiment with video, but every time I do, I'm like, oh my God, this is so much work. This is a lot harder than writing.
It is a beast. But yeah, everyone has to come into the future with us and get on video because people don't read anymore, I've heard. They watch videos.
Or Robyn, is combine the two, right? Like long form content still.
If you start with video, you can get all types of content out of that. You can get long form written content, you can get a podcast out of it. Like if you start with video, you have everything.
I feel like I love, like, that's the beauty is when you're able to kind of tick all of those different boxes for how different people learn, because even though I 100% agree with Syndey, video is the future. I think we see that whenever we survey audiences. I am one of those strange people who prefers to read.
Same, Robyn.
Even working in
I read the captions. I do not consume by listening at all.
Exactly. Yeah. So I really appreciate it when there's both available, when it's sort of like, yeah, like you can watch this video, there's captions here. There's also an article you can scan. Sometimes I scan the article and I go back to the video.
Yes.
But yeah, agreed. Like, I think that's one of the things that I've really, I've been at Vimeo now for about 3 years. And when I joined, we were really starting the push to kind of move from this very creator focused, and we love our creators, and our creators are like this huge source of inspiration, but a very creator focused product to more of a B2B SaaS product. And it's been really fun unlocking those different like things that now I can use, different things that make it easier for people who aren't necessarily video producers by trade to create videos and to record themselves and to put together events. And I just think, unlocking that, 100% agree with Syndey. It's the future.
I don't know if you'd agree with this, Robyn, but one of the things that we've seen is some of our customers will produce like a season worth of videos at a time, like a season worth of podcasts or whatever. And I think that that's really where strategy comes into play, because it's a lot easier to produce, 10 videos in a single day than to do one a week, right? Like spreading things out over time. So if you are strategic, you can, to Sydney's point, really think about all the different channels and help content be repurposed across multiple channels. I think Amanda talked about this a little bit in her session earlier, wanting to make sure that it's the same message repeated in different formats to address different types of learners and help that content go further, and also like build this resonance within your brand.
But I would say if you're going to do that, if you're going to work in batches, you better be sure of your message. You better know your audience, because you've just invested a bunch of time there. You want to know some things going into that investment.
Yeah, which is funny, because going back to Stuart's original question, like what's a common problem we see? It's spaghetti at the wall. Like, we haven't actually achieved product market fit yet. Help us create content. It's like, we want to do that, but it's a very expensive way to figure out that you're not targeting the right audience. So that is interesting, thinking about the stage that video and all of these formats kind of map back to.
Definitely.
Yeah, like the sunk cost of a blog post is a lot less than walking away from 10 hours of recorded content.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's true.
Robyn, that's super interesting about the whole change that Vimeo went from as like a creator platform to like a B2B platform. Because I remember only a couple of years ago, like, you knew you were about to watch a sweet video if it had a Vimeo URL instead of a YouTube one. You're like, oh, this one's going to be really good.
And we hope that's still true. Like, we still have this amazing creator audience, and like Staff Picks is alive and well. Like, yeah, hopefully that still rings true. But yeah, we've kind of expanded, right? Like, I feel like Vimeo's mission is very much about democratizing video now. And so it's, our creators are creating amazing, like inspiring things, better than anything you find on YouTube. And then we love YouTube too. No barbs thrown. But at the same time, a small retail business, a small one-person retail business, right? Like, that person can put together videos for their website. A B2B solo content marketer can host an event and then create a teaser video and, create a companion video for their blog posts. And like, there's just, I think unlocking that, because it has been so difficult for so long.
Mm-hmm. Tactically, what was that like? Like, what were you in a SEO position when that pivot happened?
I was not, no.
Okay.
Yeah. So so actually Syndey and I used to work at the same agency that was very focused on SEO. And I feel like I thought I was pretty SEO savvy coming into that role. I was leading the content team there and quickly realized all the things I didn't know, and got like a crash course in SEO at that agency, which was very much appreciated. No, I came into Vimeo in a purely content role. I was the content lead for the B2B side of the business, which was kind of this burgeoning, growing business. They had acquired a few different companies and we're launching some new products. And so it was just the beginning of the shift. And yeah, it was a very exciting time to join back in 2018.
What were some of the learnings you had where maybe there wasn't, like, we just talked about how important having the strategy is before doing the actual work. What was it like having moving pieces like acquiring companies and trying to pivot all your content to new stuff and making sure that the technical SEO was still pointing at the right things and kind of the back end of it? Any learnings there of like I'm sure a lot of people in the audience can resonate with a pivot happening in your business and needing to kind of like remold stuff to fit the new audience you're going after.
Yeah, and it's different challenges than starting from scratch, right? Because when you're starting from scratch, I don't know, it's easier in some ways because of the fact that you can put that strategy first and really build from the ground up. But certainly, yeah, when you're taking lots of different pieces, you have to be sometimes a little bit ruthless about what goes and what stays. Have done that at another previous company where the entire blog was focused on an audience that the product no longer served, and we needed to kind of archive all that content, start fresh, go after a brand new audience. That was really painful because it was a really beloved publication at the time. At Vimeo, it was less like that. It was more gradual. Certainly, they had audiences from these previous companies, and so a lot of that was some customer messaging to those audiences, and then really testing out. Like we were sitting right alongside sales. So the B2B team at that time was definitely like we were there to make sure that we were funneling leads into sales. So we were talking to them all the time. I think all of our best ideas definitely came from the sales team. They're talking to so many more customers than I can talk to in a day. They're talking to so many more prospects. And so that was, when I think about like the early days, that was a lot of it. A lot of it was auditing what currently existed and what was working and what was not. And so that was kind of data driven. And then it was just sitting down with salespeople at every single chance I could get. And at one point we were having we were putting together these little focus groups because we had a lot of different personas. And that was another early stage. Like we had identified, I think, something ridiculous, like 28 personas. And we were like, okay, we can't focus on all of these. we need to pare back. So that was one of the first challenges, was where are the biggest opportunities? Who are we going to focus on? And let's pick just 2 or 3 going into this next year and kind of layer on top of that. But yeah, we had these focus groups going with sales to say, okay, we want to talk to live streaming producers, right? Like we have this, at the time that was, and it still exists, our more sophisticated kind of studio product. How do we talk to them? What are you guys hearing from them? What are they concerned with? Like, what are the buzzwords that they mention? And so, yeah, a lot of it was just going to as close to the customers as possible. How can we talk to them more often? I feel like that's actually why like podcasts work so often. It's less the actual podcast and more the fact that you're talking to customers so regularly. So I mean, a lot of the strategy work was just talking to as many customers and prospects as possible and getting a really good read on what they were interested in and what actually resonated with them.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Haley.
I was just going to ask, because Michael asked a question about helping sales leaders get away from just executing on one-off ideas. Based on all your time working with these sales leaders, Robyn, like I'd love to know what your experience is, and I'm happy to share, but I bet you have a lot of insight there.
At getting away from going off of one-off ideas.
Yeah. So instead of one-off, like being more strategic. Yeah.
And I think at the beginning, it kind of needs to be a mix of both, right? Like those early wins, because of the fact that, the sales team's hungry for content. We need some customer stories. We need something. But then, setting up, okay, where are the actual gaps in our content? And if we're talking to, I personally think it all comes back to personas. If you can identify those personas, really clearly define them, then it's much easier to put together, okay, when this person that I've, not made up in my head, but like that we've constructed from all of the customer interviews, when they don't know about us, what are the types of things that they search? Where do they hang out on social? When they do know about us, like what are the types of questions that they have? And I feel like that actually, like, then you can see the gaps, like, oh, we need a customer story here. We need a bunch of how-to content here. The thing that is hardest for them to get over is, like, for us, especially with live streaming, it was, the fact that this is so nerve-wracking, right? Like we were just talking about this in the back room, that like, oh, like which button do I push? Like, how do I go live? How do I make sure I don't crash someone else's session? And so a lot of like that ended up being something that we wrote just a ton of content about. So I think it's a little bit of both, but I think it comes back to who are we focused on? Where are we seeing the most success? And let's identify the content gaps. Haley, I'd love to hear from you, especially since you like touch so many different content teams? How do you tackle that?
Yeah. So with varying levels of success, some customers, it's just like, they, like if they're in a 70-person marketing org and a really big company, like we're going to need to be a little bit week to week and flexible with the requests that come in. But generally just reiterating that we need time to figure out whether or not what we're doing is working. So let's commit to doing something and treat this as an experiment, and let's see where we're at after, say, 3 months. So I think trying to surface in the most analytical way possible, like quantitative way possible, like what are the common things that we're hearing on sales calls, and then saying, okay, this is what's highest priority, not just based on the amount of times we're hearing something, but based on, the dollar value of those accounts, strategic value, whatever. And then, putting together a group that will kind of like disagree and commit sometimes, maybe. We're not going to make everyone happy all the time, but I think that approach has worked pretty well in past.
Yeah. And I think coming back to the data, it helps make decisions that your users will like rather than the decision, right? I feel like there's a lot of opinion-based strategy happening.
Yeah.
And it cuts through that when you're just like, well, we surveyed them and they like this.
That is so interesting. And we've used that tactic, surveying customer success teams, sales teams, and really doing it in a way that it's not a bunch of people in the room where you can like feel the tension, everybody's sweating and like, my idea is better than your idea. It's like, no, it's not about what content you think we should produce. It's what pain points are we trying to solve for our customers, and then kind of like, going back from there.
Exactly. Yeah. I honestly love being proven wrong in that particular way, right? Because it brings clarity. It's like, cool, I'm wrong. We can do the right thing now.
Totally. I do love that you appreciate the balance of both one-off and kind of like a more cohesive body of ideas. A lot of our highest performing content has come from those like crazy one-off ideas, or just something mentioned in passing, right? And sometimes it's really easy to execute, which is always interesting to me. It's like the amount of time that goes into writing a piece does not at all correlate to how well it ends up performing or researching or whatever. So especially for like the more strategic content, I think.
That's a shame, isn't it?
Yeah.
It feels like it should be 1-to-1.
And I also just want to say out loud, like totally out of context, but I feel like I've said strategy multiple times on this call. And I think that's like way overblown. Oftentimes great content strategy is like a sentence. It does not have to be a lot. And I think actually both Robyn and Syndey articulated their company strategy so well and so simply. Like that's what people need to be successful.
Yeah.
Syndey, how do you figure out what your customers need before you go out and like source stock footage? Or like, I'd love to hear behind the scenes of like how you create this footage, or if you're how you source it, and then how do you make sure you're getting the right stuff, because that is your product,
right? So the cool thing is, because of the unlimited model, because there's no limit to what they're searching, we have a wealth of customer insights into what's in demand. And so we're definitely demand driven in our library and how we source things. There are a lot of other stock media companies with much larger content libraries than us, but that also means you have to dig through a lot of crud. And so we're trying to optimize our library to have exactly what you need when you need it without sifting through all of that stuff. And what Robyn was saying really resonated both on the content that we create to educate our users and to market, as well as the content that we acquire for others to use. There is so much work that goes into customer research and listening. And I think that that's one of the differences between maybe a less sophisticated content marketing team and a more sophisticated, is using those data insights. You can be so scrappy. You can do a Survey Monkey. You can do a Google form. It doesn't have to be an expensive effort. But customer research will save you, and audience research and insights will save you so much time, because as we all said, content is such an investment. You do spend so much time in it. So you want to make sure you're making the right moves.
Do you have any specific questions you like asking during those research phases?
Well, I love what Robyn was saying. We also have a very close relationship with our sales team. Just listening to the language that they're using, the pain points that they're talking about, those are the most insightful conversations that we could have. And so if you're going to ask a pointed question, it would be like, what is your biggest challenge when attempting to do this? And getting those pain points together and creating content that goes deep into that is just an obvious good starting point.
Great.
Yeah.
Love it.
How do you
Robyn
solve
or
this
Haley, do you have
problem
any
now?
questions you like asking?
Wait, Haley, what did you just say?
Oh, how do you solve this problem currently?
Yeah,
Just to
that's a good one.
understand, and then
that's a good one.
to agitate pain points. Go ahead.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'm going to dodge the question. Only because I feel like no matter how well, like how much I've thought out the questions, and this is why I'm a big fan of if you can doing live customer interviews and interspersing it with that, because no matter how much I thought out the questions, I feel like the most interesting insights almost always come from follow-up questions.
Yes.
I asked one thing and they say something that I wasn't expecting. I'm like, wait, dig into that. Like, what do you mean by that? And follow that trail. Yeah,
cool.
live when you can, because
Yes,
you won't think of all the things to ask.
Yeah, exactly.
And they'll always surprise you with language that they're using. Like your SEO research, your keyword research, you have to start somewhere. And a lot of times you won't go with what the customer is actually, the terms they're using, the language they're using, unless you're talking to them directly.
Yeah.
It's never as obvious as you think.
Especially if you're in an emerging category, right? Where you're like, how do people even talk about this? Like, it's so helpful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to turn this idea and get a little tactical about it. So like, say you were a founder, and you're the founder and you came to the conclusion that content is the growth channel that you need to pursue. But you didn't have enough time to do it yourself. Like what kind of, so two-part question is like, how would you go about from zero starting to selectively hire so that you could build a end product, like a content team that you kind of envision? So the first question is like, what would a startup content team look like? Maybe at like a under 50 person company. Let's start there. And then what would be the steps you would take to hire those, and like what would you have them doing at different stages?
Yeah. I guess I'll jump in first.
This is going to solve everyone's problems. This is the only question.
Perfect.
Done.
Everyone can go start after this. No pressure.
I would say a senior level content strategist who's aware of like emerging content types and trends, like everything from webinars to video to written form, long form, short form. Because once you have that senior person and strategist, as Haley said, like you need someone with that connective tissue. You can outsource a lot of those things in the beginning. But it's very hard unless you're hiring Animalz, I guess, to outsource the strategy.
So you're saying strategy is having someone who understands the strategy because it's easy enough to find freelancers or outsource it somehow else.
Exactly. Okay. Yes. And if you don't do that first, you're gonna waste a lot of effort on building the wrong things.
Yes, I would. So assuming that the founder does not have content and or marketing experience, and having talked to a couple of founders in the last week about this exact challenge, I would step back to talking to people in your network who know more about this than you, just like to explain the job to be done and then have them validate. I think content is often the first thing that people invest in, which totally makes sense. Like obviously a big fan of, but sometimes it doesn't make sense. So having someone kind of gut check that for you, I think is really important. Beyond that, I do think, to Sydney's point, having a strategic thinker in place is so important because it's higher leverage, right, than execution. So the strategist makes sense. And it's specifically someone who is a strategic thinker who has experience at a similar company stage to your company stage, because you could hire a strategist from Google, but their experience, like, while it is transferable, they may not have the hustle. They may not be able to deal with ambiguity. They may need more structure. I use the Pioneer, Town Planner, and Town Settler and City Planner model a lot when I think about like what different teams need at what stages. And I think this is part of why you see turnover frequently in startups with like VP of marketing hires, because they hire someone who they might need in 24 months, but like don't need immediately. I think the other risk is hiring too junior, and then they might be great, but then if you have to hire over them, then what's that feeling like? And if you're in a niche or technical area, it can get like, it takes a lot of time to ramp people up. So that's an expensive loss if you don't retain them. So I like largely agree with what Syndey's saying. Just adding that step of talking to a few people who can kind of gut check you and like really tell you, you're on the right track. Here are the specific things. Like, don't post 3 bullet job descriptions, which you do see with startups, right? But also I think posting for competencies, so skill sets that you need, that curiosity, strategic thinking, dealing with ambiguity, versus like, this is the exact responsibility because it is going to change. And you want someone who wants to be able to experiment like a scientist throughout their career journey.
Yeah, I totally agree with I feel like the theme of experimentation is really coming through. Like, hire somebody who knows how to do that. Because if you're right at the beginning of your content strategy, I mean, you probably are a little bit throwing spaghetti at the wall, and like, that's okay if there's an A/B test attached to it. I don't know. I'm definitely mixing metaphors here, but like, but you know what I mean? Like, you should be trying lots of things, but you should also be stopping lots of things quickly. So yeah, I agree. I think it's hire strategists, don't hire too junior, and also don't, as long as we're like mitigating risks, don't hire someone who you expect to be both a strategist and the creator forever. Like, I think you got to have a budget set aside for content, because if that person finds something that works, you're going to want them to scale it, and you're going to want them to find other things that work. And if they're now stuck, like, oh, okay, blogging works for our company. Now I am creating 5 blog posts a week, and that's all I do. That's a full-time job, right? Like now you're not doing anything extra. Now you're not actually learning. You're not putting together a strategy anymore. So I'd say, like, also make sure to have some budget set aside for this person. Like, set them up for success.
Robyn, were you the first marketing hire at Brazen?
I wasn't. No.
Okay.
Yeah, Jared was there before. I was the first content marketing hire at Brazen.
Right. What was the job to be done then?
The job to be done was so Brazen had Brazen Careerist, which was the blog that I mentioned earlier, right? Which had grown this huge following. And at the time, the tool was it was basically, what's that tool that like connected you? I was trying to compare it to something.
Well, they're trying to be LinkedIn for millennials, I think. Like, that was the original pitch.
Exactly. Yeah. It was LinkedIn for millennials. And they had kind of a chat roulette-like tool that would connect people, right? Like, so you could network over and then they pivoted because they realized that actually what was really helpful about their technology was helping recruiters reach out to people and recruiters connect with candidates, which they're very successful at today. And like, the team has grown so much. It's really cool to see from the outside. But yeah, the job to be done at that point was that we had this great audience of people looking for new careers, and like millennials who were looking to figure out what should they do next. But we needed to sell the technology to recruiters and to companies. And so the question became, like, how can we use this audience, like, like, not completely abandon them, but also, like, we need to build something totally new. We need to speak to this audience in a different way. And so that was the pivot. That was really what we started focusing on, and started building out like lead generation content, and kind of all of those nurture campaigns and all of the different things that that you need for like a sales-driven marketing strategy.
Which is interesting because you're talking about, like, I think a lot of the time we think about content in terms of like blog content, but you had to do a lot of other things in the early stages of Brazen, which, I mean, and you are a strategist. So and you eventually hired vendors, right? So you brought in other agencies.
We did. Yeah. We had an SEO agency, or I guess an SEO freelancer that we were working with. We had a number, like, the blog was almost completely written by freelancers, all of the large rock content I was working on. And then I think I also had a like designer developer who was like, he redid the blog for us. He designed a lot of the ebook content, designed a lot of like our new landing pages as we moved over to HubSpot. And yeah, that was like, actually, that's another reason that I mentioned budget, is because I do feel like one of the benefits you get with a senior strategist is somebody who comes in with a list of vendors in their head already, right? Yeah, that network's so valuable.
They have a playbook.
They've got a playbook. Like they've got their dev guy, they've got their designer, like they've got their favorite agency. Like as soon as the opportunity arises, they know who to call, which is really important.
Yeah,
there was a question.
Sorry.
Oh no, sorry. I was just gonna. There's a question that kind of relates to all the things we're talking about. Maybe in the form of more of like a project that we can discuss about specifically, saying that like we all agree that content is not just blogs now; it's everything. Everything you put out. So like an idea around interactive content. The example the person gave is like, say you're giving a credit, your credit product, and you have a credit rating simulator or like a thing where you like drag the button, and all of a sudden there's like pretty designs so you can see how your product works in the future, kind of visualize it. Those obviously need to have some consideration around the strategy, like why do we have this? Why is this taking up real estate on our website? But then you also have the kind of the technical side of like, how do we get people to this piece of content that is not maybe SEO dominant because it's not built that way. Do you ever work on any projects like that where the idea and the job to be done is very set in stone, but the execution might become a little bit more tricky? And do you have any distribution or ideas around how that could become a meaningful asset for a company?
We've played with at Storyblocks. We played with creating a tool or calculator for like how much money our content could save you based on how many assets you use per year. And the way that I thought about the distribution there was, one, it was a tool for salespeople. So that was pretty straightforward in their conversations. It's also, if you go back to like basic SEO, it's also could be a link building tool, like link to our, like there's so many places to link to a calculator or a tool like that within existing content out in the world. So that can be used. It can be used in life cycle, like within email marketing. A tool that can be used so many ways, which is why people invest in building them in the first place.
Yeah. I wouldn't discount SEO from that either. Tools, especially as Google moves toward like they want to satisfy the intent more than anything else. Tools sometimes can drive a ton of traffic from organic search. I mean, look how much search something like GiftMaker gets, for instance. Like, you know, like if you create the right tool for the right, and it makes sense for your audience, you can actually, I feel like that's one of the most interesting SEO playbooks that we've seen different companies take. And yeah, so that I'm very bullish on tools.
Yeah. We have, so Animalz created a product called Revive. I think we released it last year, and it allows content marketers to share their Google Analytics and then get a report of all the content that needs to be refreshed. And we spent a lot of time building that tool, but also a ton of time distributing it. So writing an article about it, well, multiple articles, and then linking back to it throughout the blog. So those internal backlinks are really important. Sharing it in our newsletter, sharing it like just individually with people and communities. And then I think as people have started to use it and just get value from it, right? It's a free tool. We've seen more of an uptick there. So there is a way to make it SEO friendly, kind of to Robyn's point. And I think this ties back to something we're seeing more and more of, which is attaching actionable templates to content. So kind of similar idea, right? It's just bringing them further down the funnel. And I think that if you're looking at your strategy holistically, sorry to keep going back to that, but you're able to say, as you're building your calendar for a quarter, maybe here's what templates or tools or, you know, whatever we're going to incorporate, any gated asset, right? So it all kind of flows together, and you're thinking about distribution, not just for a single piece, but for that entire upcoming kind of calendar of content, again, to save time.
Yeah. And certainly if you do have an SEO driven blog, like attaching that as the CTA to like it'll convert much better than go talk to our sales team or sign up for our newsletter pretty much every time.
Syndey, what was maybe we can kind of talk about a specific project, but like Syndey, how did when ReStock, when you were doing this campaign, you obviously knew that there's a job to be done. You put all the effort towards it. I assume it took a long time to do, or maybe you can describe how you launched it, whether it was like a trickle or you did it all at once. And then like the effort that you put towards that, how did your team help to distribute that? Because I think that's something that a lot of startups figure out is like, you put 80% of your effort towards, like, you might, if you're a content writer, you put 80% of your effort towards this piece of content for 3 weeks, and then it just goes live, and then there's like a LinkedIn and a Twitter message about it, and then it's like, it's so discouraging. Like, how can you as a creator and as a strategist, maybe 2 different angles on it, bake that distribution into big projects like that?
Yeah, I saw like a question about like, what does the content calendar look like and how frequently do you do it, like 3-month calendar. So when we were planning our ReStock campaign, which was all about diversifying stock footage and then telling that story outwardly, like that we have this stock footage, how important it is to use diverse stock footage. So we planned it as a big 3-month chunk, and then like also year, like moments, like 2 to 3 times a year. So we could plan it around.
Sorry, can you just describe what a moment is? I don't think I know what that is.
Yeah, so like we think about it as like marketable moments. So ReStock right now has had 3 total iterations where we worked with a cohort of creators to create collections. And cool. So each time that we've worked with a different cohort, that's a different moment for us. And then we kind of talk about what's the story we're telling throughout that moment.
Gotcha.
And so because these are all like, so we're working with a cohort, they all have created a collection of footage. We also then ask them to record and behind the scenes footage of them creating that footage. We ask them to give us an interview about how it felt to create that footage. And then we continue to package that in all different ways to continue that conversation, to continue talking about this. So right up front in the beginning of the project, we have tons of assets and tons of things that we can use. And by like versus asking them all the same questions, we can create content that's talking about all of them at once. We could dive into talking about one artist at a time. We could talk about the entire project, like, or whatever the focus area was. Like in this latest iteration, it was about Indigenous storytelling. What are some of the stereotypes and myths? What should we keep in mind when we want to represent Indigenous stories? And then just also zeroing in on the story of the creator themselves. So we're baking that all into the calendar up front.
And then how did the creators you're working with engage with that? Like, because you have this beautiful plan, but the reality of creating content is, especially if you're using outside partners, is that Thursday deadline becomes a Tuesday deadline, and all of a sudden none of your things work anymore.
Yeah, one is we have plenty of padding in our deadlines. And we build really tight relationships with our creators. We're in constant communication with them. We're constantly checking in, and we're still engaging with them. So like project's over, and that all of the initial assets have been delivered, and they came in for an internal event yesterday. We're talking to them on Instagram Live tomorrow. So it's also about engaging the partners that you work with and keeping that going as well. And so there is a team behind me that does all that. We have a team that's working with just acquiring their stock footage. We have a team that's working with just communicating with them. One on the content calendar, one, editing their assets with them. So there is a lot of effort behind the scenes and a lot of people behind it.
And then I'm sure you're also able to create content about creating content. Like in your email newsletters, you could be saying like, get ready for this next thing that's coming out. And like,
exactly.
And that's kind of the sales enablement content we were talking about before, is like, you're giving your sales team, or if you're a self-serve product, like you're giving the users the job to, you're prompting them to remember that they have a problem, and then you can solve it with this thing that's about to come out. So stay tuned.
Exactly. And we can kind of like, it's always on that cycle with us, with the ReStock project. Yeah.
There's also just a question here about like the distribution of that. So like once it went live, how did you get it in people's faces?
Yeah. So we have channel managers also on that distro. So we are talking about putting paid media efforts behind it. We're talking about our organic channels. We're talking about our email. We're talking about our sales team, putting it in front of people. Everyone that is in charge of a distribution channel weighs in and brainstorms what they're going to do to distro this content. And we have that all up front so that we can get them the additional assets that they need in order to make it effective.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anything you would have done differently now that you're looking at it in the past? Any opportunities that seem like, oh, should have done that?
I think that in the first iteration, I mean, as everyone talks about testing and experimentation, I think that we tiptoed in basically in terms of maximizing our distribution, putting paid media dollars behind it. I would have gone harder in the upfront and not tiptoed in.
Love it. Hit it hard.
Yeah.
All right, we're about out of time here. Two things. I want to give each of you a moment to talk about the work you're doing and call out anyone who you think is worthy of the stage. And then the second thing is, Robyn, you have to get the cat on camera so that everyone can see it. And we need a name. People were loving that at the beginning.
Oh yeah, his name is Calvin. He's asleep over here now, but I could go wake him up.
I don't know. Do we want him to? Do we want Robyn to wake up Calvin?
All right. I'll be right back.
Well, she's grabbing Calvin. Haley, do you want to tell people where they can learn more about your work?
Yeah, sure. So by day, I'm the COO of Animalz, as Stuart mentioned. We are a strategy-led content marketing agency. Would love to connect and help in any way I can. In the evenings, I work for Hustle Fund as a venture partner. They are on a mission to democratize access to capital, network, and knowledge in startup ecosystems by founders who hustle. So if you are raising or thinking about it or just interested in angel investing, would love to chat more. Lastly, I love one of their portfolio companies, Flow Club. So if you ever want to co-work online, would love to hang out and have the opportunity to go deeper into some of these topics with you.
Amazing. Robyn, do you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sorry, I had my headphones off for a second while I was grabbing Calvin. This is Calvin, everybody.
We want to know if Calvin has a Twitter handle.
He does not, but he does have an Instagram handle.
No way. What's his Instagram?
I don't want to say.
Okay, don't worry about it.
Okay. I'll tell you after, and you'll understand why.
It's got your home address in it, probably.
Exactly. Are we at the part where are we plugging things that we're working on right now? Okay,
Yes, please.
Awesome. Thank you. So this week actually, Vimeo launched Vimeo Events, which I am very psyched about. I am really big on live events, as you might imagine, at a company like Vimeo. And I do feel like in my entire content marketing career, they have never been easy. It has always been like there's a couple of things that strike fear in the heart of every marketer, right? And it's hitting send to a list of 50,000 people and going live. And so I really we launched this new product. It's so fun to use. It's drag and drop. And so you can load in pre-built scenes along with your live scenes. Everyone can be behind the scenes together before you actually go live. You can have your script there. It's just anyone from the intern to the CEO can stand up this sleekly produced event. And of course, it's Vimeo quality from a browser. And so, yeah, that's what I'm really excited about this week, especially. Check it out at vimeo.com/features/virtual events.
Yeah.
Cool.
/special events
/virtual events. I can drop it in the chat too.
Yeah, if you could grab it, that'd be good. Oh, Patrick, our boy Patrick's been the link master all week, so he's got it. And Syndey, what about you? Where can people learn more about your work?
Yeah, so you can find me and find our work at storyblocks.com/restock. Basically, you should be creating more video. However much you're creating now, you should be doing more. And you should be thinking about making that video more inclusive and more representative of the world. And that's what the ReStock project helps you do. So check us out there. And yeah, that's all from me.
Sweet. I'll put your link it in there as well. Well, thank you so much, the three of you. This was really great. Thanks everyone for participating and for the awesome questions as well. This was really great. I think there's a lot of content people in the audience right now, and this is especially useful for Domain Curve as well, learning about how other teams are running their content. So I appreciate you going into the details and unearthing.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much, Stuart. This was fun. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Sweet. Everyone stick around or go grab some water, grab a coffee, whatever time of the day it is for you. And our next session is in 8 minutes. So we'll see you on the next stage, and I'll see everyone here backstage. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Cool.